Oh, yes, let's talk about the Chicago Bears of Texas. Oh, I can see the flaming keyboard fingers now. How dare you say that about the Cowboys? They are not the Bears of Texas. Stop saying that, you hater. Well, last time I checked, it's been decades since that Cowboys team has been to a Super Bowl. Cowboys fans find themselves talking about the glory days that are several decades back. Yeah, it's fucking Bears football in Texas is what the hell it is. And you know damn good and well it is too. Tell me where I'm lying. I'm just saying. But anyways, you know, the ironic thing is, as fun as it is to hate on the Cowboys, and it certainly is, and as fun as it is to come on here and say, how about them Cowboys? Yeah! The reality is the Cowboys are a really good team. They were in 2022. However, as good as they are, or were, it wasn't good enough, right? You look at last season, and this is a team that went 12-5, and they had kind of a balanced, complete roster, but when it mattered most, they came up short, and in particular, their quarterback came up short. So even though they beat the Bucs in the wild card round, they lost to the 49ers in the divisional round, like, nyeh. Like, that's it, right? And a season where, you know, Cowboys fans would have been understandable if they came and they said, hey, you know what, like, we think this team could go to the Super Bowl. I certainly thought it was either going to be the Eagles or the Cowboys coming out of the NFC for several weeks, and it just didn't happen. So now you come into 2023 and you wonder, like, the way this Cowboys team is currently constructed, like, can they get back there? Can they actually make an NFC championship game, let alone a Super Bowl, for God's sakes, right? And it's a fair and valid question to ask. Where the Cowboys were busy in the offseason was giving money to some of their core guys, right? They gave a big contract extension to corner Trayvon Diggs. They gave an extension to safety Malik Hooker. They just recently gave a massive extension to right tackle Terrence Steele. So Jerry Jones is certainly investing in his talent, which is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of years when you've got other contracts you might have to do, such as Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb, and maybe or maybe not Dak Prescott as well. They traded for Brandon Cooks, and then, you know, a couple of weeks ago, they made the trade to bring in Trey Lance. Well, that's a really interesting potential long-term play, although I wish Trey Lance would have been able to land somewhere where he could have gotten some playing time. That's the single biggest problem for that young man. He just didn't get much playing time, and it'd be nice for him to be able to get some playing time. But, you know, the Cowboys gave away a fourth-round pick to the 49ers, and it's worth the swing at the plate at this point, in my opinion. In terms of what the Cowboys did in the draft, I wasn't exactly blown away by it. I think Maisie Smith will come in and improve their run defense day one. It was a really interesting look when you saw the draft war room for the Cowboys when they were debating Maisie Smith, and I think it was Matthew Bergeron. Like, those seemed to be the two players they were debating at pick 27, and they ultimately landed on Maisie. And again, he's going to improve their run defense, which was a little soft last year. He is going to improve that run defense, you would assume, quite a bit. But Schoonmaker, like, he should get an opportunity to get playing time at tight end, but, you know, this is a team that lost Dalton Schultz. You got to wonder, like, Schoonmaker felt like a bit of a reach there, or probably they were really wishing they would have gotten Dalton Kincaid. In terms of this roster, you know, all jokes aside, this is a really damn good team. They're well built. You look at that offensive line. A couple of years ago, I felt they were overrated in terms of how the media viewed them versus the reality of how they played. But assuming these guys are healthy, like Zach Martin, future Hall of Famer, he's still a stud. Tyron Smith, if he stays healthy, he's still a stud. You know, Terrence Steele was a bit of a revelation at right tackle last year. Like, this is a fundamentally solid offensive line. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball and you look at their pass rush. You've got Micah Parsons. Like, for those that didn't get to see Lawrence Taylor, you wonder what Lawrence Taylor was like to watch. The closest thing that I've seen in my lifetime to Lawrence Taylor, and I've seen a lot of great NFL players, I've seen a lot of great pass rushers, it's Micah Parsons. Like, no joke. Like, that dude is that legit. He is that much of a fucking freak. And the Cowboys have him. And then you got DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side. Like, this is a team that can get after opposing quarterbacks, and I expect we'll be able to do so again in 2023. And, you know, it's not a bad place to be, right? Like, the Cowboys, their success, I even go back to the 90s. You could focus on the triplets, talking about Aikman, Emmett, and Irvin. And even if you want to throw in Moose Johnston and Novacek and Alvin Harper and so forth, you know, the strength of that team was in the trenches, the Great Wall of Dallas on the offensive line, their defensive line. Like, that was the foundation for everything that they did when they won those 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. You know, and it feels like that's a similar type of blueprint and foundation that they have in Dallas now. In terms of some of the question marks for this team, I already mentioned one, which is the tight end position. They lose Dalton Schultz. Like, is Schoonmaker or anybody else really going to be able to come in and replace that production? I highly doubt it. So that'll be something to watch. Then I look at the running game without Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Zeke was the same Zeke of a few years ago, and Tony Pollard had clearly supplanted him as running back 1, and he's now the lead back in 2023. But you look at last year, they had Tony Pollard and they had Zeke. Now they've only got one of the two. So how well are they going to be able to run the ball? Like, does Tony Pollard have any drop-off as being the featured full-time back in 2023? But all of that doesn't really matter. It comes down to Dak Prescott. And what's crazy about this is that this isn't even like an indictment of him in the regular season, although he threw too many picks last year. It's how does he play in the big spot? Like, the reason the Cowboys didn't make it to the NFC Championship game, I lay largely at the feet of Dak Prescott. Like, they need him to be one of those Cowboys quarterbacks of the past. He needs to be able to step up and be that level of dude. I just don't know that he has it in him, frankly. And you wonder, like, if the Cowboys are going to squander some really good opportunities to potentially win a Lombardi Trophy or two because they're waiting for Dak Prescott to be something he's ultimately never going to be. Time will tell. Time will tell this year. But as I look at the Cowboys and their schedule, like, the first 2 weeks of the season, interesting start for them. They go to the Giants on Sunday night in week 1, and then they host the Jets and Aaron Rodgers in week 2. You know, if the Cowboys want to bang with the Eagles, have a chance to win the NFC East, get home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs, probably want to go 2-0 in that stretch. Then you look at weeks 5 and 6, they got a couple more road games against what you would assume would be quality teams in the 49ers and the Chargers. So, you know, early on, the Cowboys are in a spot with some of these matchups, like, they could struggle a little bit. And then you get to weeks 13 through 17. You know, the schedule doesn't exactly get a whole lot easier, right? Because they host Seattle, they host Philadelphia. Then they've got to go on the road 2 straight weeks to face AFC East teams in Buffalo and Miami. And then circle back in week 17 at home against Detroit. So, yes, you got 3 home games in that stretch. But you look at that, that's 4 playoff teams from last year, plus the Lions, who were pretty damn close to being a playoff team. So if the Cowboys aren't careful, like, they could disappoint a little bit this year. I don't think they will. As I mentioned, this is still a pretty damn good roster. I think 11 or 12 wins is potentially in the cards for the Cowboys, assuming everybody is healthy. But, you know, we will see. It's not about the regular season, though. It's about, can you get Dak healthy through an entire season? And then when it comes playoff time, can he avoid the big mistakes and can he make the big plays when it matters most? That's what it comes down to.